Hey, hello, what's up, and how you doing? Welcome into this week's episode of the Geek Garage, where we are going back to the movies. Unfortunately, not for real, since everything is still unfortunately closed. Suck it, coronavirus. Basically, this week we will be covering the last of our first watches. What a strange sentence that was. Where David had me watch The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo from 2011, directed by David Fincher, and I had him watch Escape from New York from 1981, directed by John Carpenter. As we said before, these are the first times that either of us have watched the other's picks. So this is the first time I watched Girl with Dragon Tattoo. This is the first time that David watched Escape from New York. We will begin by giving each a bit of a spoiler-free plot summary. We're not going to hit every plot point, obviously, because we're going to avoid the spoilers. And then we'll dive into some more details that will have spoilers, most likely. So we'll put a flyer, so to speak, up there so that when we start getting into spoiler territory, you will know. But the first part of the podcast should be pretty spoiler-free. If you've never seen either one of these movies, you should be safe to listen to it if you're interested in eventually watching them.
Yep.
But before we get into that, a couple things to cover. First, allow me to introduce show founder and the guy that's always there for some reason, David. How are you, David?
I'm good. How are you?
I was better before that, but what are you going to do?
I am not known for my impersonations, my impressions. So that was like Ray Romano and Kermit the Frog, and like all those other really nasally, wheezy comedians and comics.
That sounded like Ray Romano and Kermit the Frog having violent sex on cocaine.
I'm cool with that.
Are you?
let's just push forward, all right?
Ever forward. And of course, as always, an update on some of the goings-on that the podcast is involved in. And unfortunately, this week...
There are none.
They're all bad. Almost all of the events that we'd hoped to be a part of have been postponed. That includes EvilCon, which the news for that just came down earlier this week. It has been postponed until 2021. Very sad to hear about that. They held out as long as they could, but I understand why they did it, and I respect that they made the decision. MomoCon has also been postponed again until 2021. Nashville Comic Con also postponed to 2021. You'll notice a recurring theme. MTAC has been postponed and not yet rescheduled. Would you like to take a bet that it will be to 2021?
I will take that bet.
Yes, that is a sucker bet, as they say. And finally, ICYMI, which thankfully so far is still set for July 24th to 26th.
But we'll see.
Hopefully that goes off without a hitch and also can be held safely. That's of course the number one thing. You know, I know that a lot of us want to get out there and interact and have a little
talk
bit
to
of
people.
Have some social gathering for a change. But you know, the big thing is making sure that we can do so safely. So, you know, if you're interested in the Middle Tennessee area or close to it, if you're interested in the Nikon, you can find them on Facebook to get better updates than our weekly ones. We do hope to see everyone there if it goes off without a hitch and can do so safely. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Coming up on the website, we have a new blog that we're going to be starting eventually, I promise, called Comic Corner. It's essentially going to be a blog post in lieu of an episode about comics that David or I should say, have read and enjoyed. I know he and I have talked about that before on the podcast and off. David, what have you decided on what your first post is going to be about?
Yeah, I actually started writing it late last week, and my first pick is going to be Batman Nightfall, Volume 1.
Nice.
Yes, the infamous backbreaker Batman tale. Yeah. And yes, we talked about it a little bit, I believe, on the Batman episode, just the All Things Batman, where we celebrated 50 episodes and celebrated appropriately with Batman. I don't know why that's appropriate. Anyways, yeah, that's my first pick. Ted, have you nailed down your first?
Yes, I actually have, and I started it. Started writing that post Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday. All the days are running together. None of it matters.
Sunday.
We're all moving ever forward to oblivion.
Yes.
Yeah. So my first pick is going to be The Punisher Max.
Yeah.
By Garth Ennis and cadre of different artists, all of them crazy talented. It's my favorite Punisher run, and honestly one of my favorite comics, maybe my favorite comic run ever. So very excited to write about that.
Yeah, that's saying a lot
Yeah.
because you've read a lot. So
I have a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of
yeah.
them. But I'm very excited about that.
Hmm.
Not for the squeamish, that book. No.
Yes, it is in fact the Punisher.
Yes, and also from the Max imprint. But
Hmm.
yeah, so hope to get that published here in the next couple of weeks. As always, we have other other things going on in life.
Yeah.
We have our second fan assessment of the year coming up, our second quarter fan assessment, which will have a lot of the same or similar questions as the first one, but we encourage everyone to check it out, particularly if you did not respond to the first one. We know who you are.
Actually, we don't. We only know the ones that did fill it out, but we
Yes.
can do deductive reasoning and math.
Yes.
Actually, I can't do either of those, so I'm going to pawn it off on Ted.
Well,
S- uh,
we will figure it out. How's that?
yes, we will figure it out. But either way, yeah, look out for the fan assessment. It will be hitting the social media airwaves, as the kids say, and you can find it, fill it out, put your name and email address, and you will be entered to win a free T-shirt from the Geek Garage merch store.
Yes, a free
Which,
T-shirt of your choice.
yes, you can even pick, if you so choose, if you would like, the ultra soft fabric that is provided by Threadless. Let me tell you, I bought one of these shirts, and holy hell, is it soft! Both the super soft and the tri blend are just it's like wearing feathers on your chest. It's so luxurious.
That sounds terrible, actually, but okay. Moving right along, speaking of social media, that was called a segue. We do have the new Facebook group,
Yep.
Fans of the Geek Garage podcast, where people actually talk, because it turns out if you make something that people are allowed to talk in, they'll fucking talk in it. What a concept.
Yes.
But check that out. We throw some polls up there from time to time that get all the nerds up in a tizzy, as they say, and we got some good debates going on there.
Hmm.
Maybe David will pass on to you my opinion of your opinions, which are all terrible and wrong. But that's neither here nor there. Also, on the Facebook group, we have done things like asking for episode suggestions, thanking everyone that participates, because we do surprisingly have people that care to participate, which, thank you, but also why? And finally, we're taking all suggestions into serious consideration, and again, we do thank you to the listeners and to everyone that has offered suggestions or voted in the polls or explained why their opinions are good, even though they're wrong, because their opinions are bad. So, with all that out of the way, it's now time to talk about the two movies right after
This.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. This.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All right. So, first off, David, we're going to be covering Escape from New York.
We are.
Quick synopsis without spoilers. Kurt Russell stars as Snake Plissken, General Badass,
Yes.
who is tasked with going into New York, which has been converted into the maximum security prison,
Yes.
the most maximum security prison, in fact, where the island of Manhattan has become a giant prison. For those of you that have played Batman Arkham City, imagine that, except good. I'm kidding. I love that game. Imagine that, except 30 years ago with Kurt Russell, and you're pretty close. Because it's a movie, shit goes bad. But it's Kurt Russell, so it rules. It's
Right.
also John Carpenter, so it rules. There's basically nothing about this movie that doesn't rule. I don't know if I can stress that enough. There is the spoiler-free synopsis. From here on out, spoilers are open and on the table.
In fact, they are.
In fact, they are. So,
Yes.
David, simple question to lead it off. What did you think?
So, first of all, I felt a little guilty because my movie pick for you was like twice as long as this one was for me. Like, I was able to watch it twice like back to back in 2 days, like no problem. Like I watched it once, and I didn't want to have the same issue with Ip Man where I was only able to watch it once and only give a certain piece of my mind to it because I didn't have the chance to watch it again. So I kind of took advantage of that opportunity where it was only about 90 minutes long and rewatched it today before the podcast. And I'll jump right from that saying I enjoyed it. Like I legit really liked it.
That's good because it's an
Yeah.
awesome movie. I feel like I have not said that enough, so I'm going to continue to say it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I understand why you and so many other people really like it and enjoy it. John Carpenter is still, in fact, the man.
Yeah. I know that we've covered him pretty extensively on the podcast in the past, which is basically been the thing that I've influenced the most is the fact that, hey, let's do another John Carpenter episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I feel like I would appreciate the movie more if I saw it when I was younger. It just had that quintessential 80s feel where I was like, damn it, like I love this movie, but I bet I'd love it even more if I saw it at that primitive like age, like right at like 12 or 13 years old, where you're like, oh fuck, like I want to be Kurt Russell. I want his like eye patch and I want his like flowy hair and his awesome like leather jacket. Like I want to be fucking Kurt Russell. And
that's the right reaction to this film. Yes.
So and I'm not just saying that because I'm fucking bald. So yeah, I so there's that. I guess it's a little bit of a caveat, but ultimately overall, like I really liked it. Obviously enough to where I wanted to watch it a second time. And
For sure.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, without getting into like super specifics yet, yeah, just those are my overall thoughts. Like I liked it. I thought that a lot of it held up really well. The fact that they shot like on location instead of just like sound stages, and the splicing together of like the landscape shots of the choppers and everything like flying either into or out of Manhattan. You know, where they had like where they created, I don't know if that's like supposed to be the Hudson or what, but had that. And then, you know, you could see part of the wall that blocks off Manhattan and then Manhattan itself. Just the way that was all put together. I was like, God damn, that still looks really good.
Yeah.
And it's because like it wasn't done 100% by 1981 computer software,
which probably wasn't capable of computer
No.
generation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you to kind of backpedal a little bit. I think you raised a good point with the bit you mentioned about appreciating it more if you saw it when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is probably because this type of movie has really, like this, as with many of Carpenter's films, this was super influential. So that
Right.
like bleak, hard sci-fi aspect of this has been done a lot since 1981.
Right.
And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, it's kind of boring now because it's just been done so many times.
Right. Yeah, we've actually talked about this a few times recently, where we'll be discussing movies of this caliber, but were released during this time period, and like so many more modern and contemporary films have I guess aped the whole overarching theme and feel and look of these old 80s movies. And so now you're so used to seeing it in these new movies, you go back and watch the old ones and you're like, I feel like I've kind of seen this already.
Yeah, I still think that this film and really Carpenter in general pull it off better than any of the other films that ate from it.
Yeah.
Part of that may be because it's like I saw this when I was like 13, you know what I mean? So it's like it stuck with me because it hit me right at that impressionable age you talked about.
Right.
Or it could just be that Carpenter's like way underrated as a director. I know I kind of believe both of those things, but it's not super relevant to the discussion. Um, yeah, I mean, I obviously I love this movie. John Carpenter is probably my favorite director. Um, it's hard to say he's not because I think I've watched his movies more than I watched any other directors. So I feel like just based on that, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think there are probably directors that are more technically proficient, but in terms of sheer enjoyment, there's not really anybody that's fucking with him, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, for sure. He is the master of this and his craft. It's I mean, just what he does, he just does so well. And yeah, it's always a treat getting to watch his movies, regardless of whether it's when you're 13 or now when you can appreciate film a little bit more and pick apart certain things and analyze it on a level that you can't do when you're a little bit younger. So
Right.
I don't want to say that like I didn't really enjoy it because I'm old as fuck now. That's because that's definitely not the case. So yeah, at least now, knowing or having a little bit more knowledge of film theory, to sound like a pompous ass, I can, like I said, dissect it a little bit more and look at certain pieces and what have you. So yeah.
All right. So, what talk about some of your favorite scenes or favorite moments from the film.
Sure. So I kind of saw this going down pretty terribly before it happened, but towards the beginning, when the president shoots out of Air Force One in his little escape pod, crashes into somewhere in Manhattan. I forget exactly where. So when the initial attempt to rescue the president by is it Hawk or Hauk?
I honestly can't remember. I think it's
I think it's Hauk.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, either way, him and his big old team of army dudes, they go in trying to look for the president, and Romero, this methed out Billy Idol looking motherfucker, comes out. It's literally like if you took Billy Idol and said, all right, you have to live in Manhattan now, but the only people that live there are like the world's worst prisoners or convicts, and good luck. And by the way, you have to file your teeth into like fangs. He's like one of my favorite characters, and he doesn't even have like a big part, but I mean he's just kind of hysterical. And so that was one of my favorite parts, is just like all of them showing up with like all their gusto, and this one single dude comes out of like the shadows and he's like, yeah, we have the president. If you don't leave in 30 seconds, we're gonna fucking kill this guy. And he's like, all right, I'm ready to talk. And he's like, 29.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
do love
well,
that. Or he's just
yeah,
like completely not fucking around at all.
right. And then Hauk's like, okay, cutting more straight to the point. He's like, what do you want? And he's like, 26, 25. And yeah, and then they scurry off, and they have to resort to hiring um Mr. Snake to go get the president. Also, like the during the whole movie, I was like, Snake, 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 like
Mhm.
from Metal Gear Solid. I was like,
Yeah.
Snake.
Yeah,
I
Kojima, Hideo Kojima, creator of Metal Gear mythos and games, he very clearly took a lot of inspiration from this film, as well as a lot of others.
right.
But definitely, I mean, it's very clear that he was heavily inspired by this one.
Right. I was never a player of Metal Gear Solid. I had friends that played, and so I got to watch them play. So yeah, I remember the eye patch, the long flowy hair, the very gritty look, and so I'm watching this and I was like, okay, it's not just the name that matches, like it's the look too. Like what the hell's going on here? Uh
Yeah, the first Metal Gear came out in the '80s for the original
right.
NES, so it was a bit more of the time, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, as the graphics got better and the consoles got better, it just became more obvious. It's like, oh shit, he was not fucking around. It's literally Kurt Russell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I I love pretty much everything in between hiring Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, him going in to rescue the president, that whole journey and whatnot. But probably my favorite is the battle between him and what's the dude's name? It's just like he just has one name and he's like some big ass dude in like a leather diaper, and they first battle with bats, and then after round one they battle with bats with nails, and that is hard as fuck.
It's true. That is hard as fuck.
Yeah. I was watching. I was like, oh, okay. Well, this escalated quickly. Like like not only did they capture Snake, but they're gonna make him fight this huge dude. And he gives him the old 1-2 to the back of the noggin, and everyone's like, oh shit, he beat them, and they were like, Snake, Snake, Snake. It's just fucking hilarious, but I mean, in the most awesome way possible. And another part that okay, so it feels weird saying that this was like a favorite part of mine, or I enjoyed this, but I guess I liked it from a practical effects point of view, and we've discussed at length John Carpenter's dedication to practical effects. And when right after Brain, like I think he steps on a landmine and he basically gets blown up, he shoots in the air, lands on a car, and Maggie, I guess I guess they're friends. I don't know, but she's pretty tore up from the floor up that he's pretty much dead, and so she gets really pissed at Duke because I mean this is all his fucking fault. Let's get down to brass tacks here, and they all see him coming down the bridge, and so she's like, you know what? Y'all go ahead. I'm gonna just shoot at this fucker as he charges towards me. So they get going, and she shoots at this dude and he fucking wrecks her shit. Like just plows into her, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And like the way, yeah, and the way that they made that look like was fantastic. Like, I mean, I don't know what kind of trickery they use to cut and I guess use a mannequin or some sort of like fake person stand-in.
No, they literally just murdered Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, that was her claim to fame.
Yeah,
getting hit by a car, going out, taking one for the team. But yeah, that was. I mean, like I said, it felt kind of weird to say like, yeah, that was awesome. Like watching someone get hit by a car.
It's a great shot, though. It's a great shot.
Right. Yeah, and the very end when Houck offers he not only they not only pardon him, let him go free from prison, but he offers him a job. I forget exactly what the title was, but he's like, I want to offer you a job, you want to come work for me. And but before he does that, he's like, you gotta kill me now, Snake, because like at the very beginning when they meet and they're about to bid farewell, for now, he's like, next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. And so, they see each other again at the very end. He's like, you got to kill me now, Snake. And he just replies, I'm too tired. Maybe later.
Yeah. There's so many great Snake lines in this movie.
Right. Yeah.
That one's a great one. Particularly that one's a great one, but
what are some of the other like good one-liners that you know of? Because I mean, there's a few that I remember, but you also have seen this movie a few more times than I have.
There's a good one where one of the women in the movie calls him a cop, and Pliskin says, "No, I'm an asshole." That's a fucking phenomenal one.
God, I'm gonna use that.
He's talking to Hulk, and Hulk says, once you're inside, you're on your own. Snake says, "Oh, you mean I can't count on you?" To which Hulk replies, "No." And Pliskin just goes, "Good."
Yeah, he just like clicks him off. He's like,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. When Hulk is first telling him about what's happening, so there's an accident. The president was down in New York, and Snake just goes, "The president of what?" he just does not. He just does not give a fuck.
Right.
Which is not only a great one-liner, but also shows it tells you a lot about the character with just a simple line of dialogue. So
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, instead of the ye old exposition dump, you get basically his entire character in the span of like 3 minutes, and
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
there's some definite exposition dump, where they do give you the
Sure.
background on him, but I think as effective are some of the one-liners and just some of the mannerisms where he just clearly is like, "Don't care, fuck you."
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's pretty much all that I had. Is there anything that you would like to touch on before we push forward?
If you haven't seen this movie, you're not living correctly, basically.
Well, thankfully, I have now seen this movie, so I can therefore live correctly.
We don't want to do too deep of a dive into it and just make the whole episode about, about this, but this is one of Carpenter's best movies. It's in the top 3 easily, and you could go around in circles making arguments about which one of his films is the best one.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a solid choice. For me, it's probably number 2, maybe number 3. I'd have to really, really think about it. I don't think it's as good as The Thing, but I mean, I also
Mm-hmm.
think that The Thing is one of the best movies ever put to film. So I mean, it's
Yeah, this definitely didn't beat out The Thing for me. I mean, as far as all the John Carpenter films that I have seen thus far, I mean, Halloween and The Thing are pretty close, but I feel like The Thing, as of right now, is the leader.
But yeah, I mean, this movie is great. I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. I don't know if it's available to stream anywhere
Yes,
right now.
it's as of right now, it is available on Amazon Prime for free.
Oh, dope. Yeah,
Yeah,
so if you have
that is
a Prime account with ye old or Lord Amazon, you can watch it for free.
yeah.
Otherwise, you can probably find the DVD for like next to nothing.
Right, yeah. One last thing I wanted to throw out. So this was pretty coincidental, but a good friend of mine, my friend Megan, she's also a coworker. She gave me this awesome movies book. It's just a list of top 10, or it's just a bunch of top 10 lists from movies, and it's all in alphabetical order. So the very first one is the top 10 list of anti-heroes. And funny enough, the number one in that list was Snake Plissken from Escape from New York.
Yeah, I agree. As I texted you when you told me that is the correct answer.
Yes, it is in fact the correct answer. So, yeah, that was a fun um, little fun accident. And also thank you, Megan. You probably not listening because you are smart and avoid our podcast. But if you happen to be listening, I once again appreciate the book. So thank you. So yeah, Ted, you want to push forward with the girl with the dragon tattoo, US version?
Sure.
Cool. So, short synopsis, no spoilers once again. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, US version from 2011 by David Fincher. It is a thrilling tale based off of the late Stieg Larsson's novel of the same name. It follows journalist Michael Bloomquist and PI/computer hacker Lisbeth Salander, both independently and together. Bloomquist independently deals with the blowback/consequences of his libel lawsuits that he filed against businessman Hans Erik Wennerstrom with Lisbeth Salander. In the beginning of the movie, she is dealing with her new state-appointed guardian who, after her current state-appointed guardian suffers a stroke, she's been a ward of the states for basically ever, almost, since her early teens, I believe, according to the movie. And when they're two paths finally cross. They end up teaming up to solve a cold case of Harriet Wenger, who has been missing for over 40 years. She basically has been presumed dead since they never found her. Initially, Michael Bloomquist is hired by Henrik Wenger. He is played by Christopher Plummer. Shortly after hiring Bloomquist, he seeks the help of Elizabeth. He's like, hey, I need an assistant. And he's like, I got one for you. She did the background check on you. And he's like, fucking excuse me, what? So yes, that's basically all the information that I can give you that is spoiler free. Ted, would you like to jump into official spoiler territory?
Yes.
Cool beans. What did you think?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. It's very clearly a Fincher movie. That's not a knock by, in any way. Just to say that he definitely has his own sort of signature style. He does things sort of his own kind of way. It's very recognizably his type of film,
right?
Which we'll get into a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. It's a great mystery, which I'm a sucker for mysteries. So I definitely enjoyed that aspect of it.
Cool. Awesome. I do have a few questions lined up for you. Nothing too comprehensive, just a couple of quick ones. So would you like to get to those now, or do you want to get to some of your favorite parts of the film?
No, you can go ahead with the questions. That's fine.
Okay. I'm curious, were you able to guess the ending? Because I was not. You are a lot smarter than I am, or as you can like seek out little things and guess a little bit better than I can. So I was curious to see if you were able to guess any parts of the ending.
I had a pretty good idea it was Martin, only because Stellan Skarsgård was the only other name in the movie.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, at a certain point, it's kind of it's not going to be the random Swedish actor they hired. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
going to be a named, pretty well known, or at least somewhat well known actor or actress. So I had a good idea about that. I also kind of figured that she had assumed the identity of the dead relative and was living it in London.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, no, that's too cute. They're not going to do that. And then they did it. I was like, oh, you bastards.
I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want to say it plays out a little bit differently in the book. It's been a while since I read the book. I actually read it leading up to. I think I finished it like the day before the movie came out back in 2011, 2012, whenever it was. And so I wanted to be that pompous ass that said like, I read the book first. And I remember the ending, that big reveal of her still being alive and assuming someone else's identity. That played out a little bit differently. I can't remember what the details were, but I do know that it was a little bit different in the book. But yeah, I didn't take too much issue with how it played out in the movie. I still thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think it was done in as kind of eye-rolly of a fashion as similar twists have been done in other films, where it wasn't just like, oh, gotcha,
Right.
The way that it was sort of tied up, like all the threads were there, so it wasn't just like, oh, it's a twist for the sake of a twist, it made sense.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to get your opinion on Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara's acting performances. I thought that they were pretty good, and it was a lot of fun to see Daniel Craig play a role so unlike James Bond, which is were the movies that he was like knocking out left and right at this period of time when this movie came out. And also Rooney Mara, she had just done like her small role in The Social Network, and she was almost like unrecognizable, like with all the piercings and the hair and just everything, like and especially like with all the weight that she lost. So I was curious to hear your opinions on the acting performances.
Yeah, I thought Craig was all right. His him just being like, I'm not gonna bother doing an accent was okay. All right, I can live with that.
Hmm.
But I, the thing is, I can't really think of who else I would have put in that role that would have made sense.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's somebody, but there's something about Daniel Craig when compared to somebody like, to stick with Bonds, like Pierce Brosnan, where like I can't picture Pierce Brosnan doing a role like this. He doesn't seem to have it in him to be like, I don't think anybody would buy him as like a disgraced anything. You know what I mean? Whereas
He's
you
too
look at Daniel,
handsome.
right. He's too perfect. Whereas you look at somebody like Daniel Craig and you're like, he looks just like somebody that you could conceivably work with.
Hmm.
Just like an incredibly handsome version of that. So
Sure.
you could see them, you could see Daniel Craig and be like, that guy that I work with is a fucking moron. You know what I mean? So like,
Right, like, oh yeah, he definitely committed libel.
right. um,
I mean, like, he's sexy as fuck, but yeah, he definitely committed libel.
right. Um, so he had that going for him. I thought the performance he did, his performance was fine. I don't personally think it was anything to write home about necessarily, but it wasn't
Sure. Yeah.
bad. I think Rooney Mara was great.
Hmm.
She really, like, the character of Elizabeth Salander is just like so complicated and so complex, and I think that
That's
she did
putting it mildly.
yeah, that's putting it mildly. But I think that she did a very good job of sort of showing vulnerability, whereas also turning it around and like portraying that Elizabeth is like antisocial and has the sort of take no prisoners sort of attitude, but you can tell that that's kind of more bravado in some ways, and I think Rooney Mara did a great job, moving kind of back and forth and walking that tightrope
Hmm.
between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I thought that her performance was awesome. She goes down in my history book as one of the most badass female characters, both in book and movie form. She she's awesome. But man, like, she got her new state appointed guardian. She fucked his shit up. That's
Literally. Spoiler alert.
Oh, yes. He did, in fact, get his shit pushed in
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Whew. That was an uncomfortable scene. Effective. But
Yes. Right. They were, I can just imagine people like scrambling around with this book, like, oh, we got to find a director for this. We got to find a director. And like David Fincher just comes out of the shadows and he's like, I direct this kind of madness. Did you not see me put Gwyneth Paltrow's head in a box? I did.
He did that.
He did. Last question, just about Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's soundtrack / score. How on a scale of 9 to 10, how awesome was it for you?
I don't know that I would call it awesome necessarily. It was definitely effective.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I would say is that I don't think I would call it awesome is because it was also uncomfortable as shit,
Yeah.
basically for
Well,
the duration.
sure. Yeah.
Which, again, that's not a knock. That's very effective for the type of film it is.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps you on your edge, or excuse me, it keeps you on the edge, I should say. It does a great job of adding tension without becoming the focus of why there's tension.
Right.
There's these low tones that you almost don't even register, and I don't mean in the sense of like they're low on the on the oral spectrum where you have trouble hearing them. Like, they're very clearly there. They're there. It's just they're sort of so low and in the background that it's mostly just like you feel this discomfort rather than like hear it and you're like, oh, that's weird and kind of gross to listen to. Like it just kind of
Right.
seeps in and you're like, ugh. It just feels wrong somehow. The sound design overall, which of course that is part of, is super effective. There were multiple times where there were sound effects and I was just like, oh fuck. Just like I said, just kind of gross, but effective. Again, gross isn't a knock. It's
Right.
supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that kind of music is kind of my jam, especially how it fits the story so well. So I was just curious to hear your thoughts. But yeah, let's push forward, and I want to hear about a few of your favorite parts or scenes from the movie.
Well, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to name a few of my favorite things as well as scenes. Like I said before, you can definitely tell this is a David Fincher movie.
Mm-hmm.
I like that he basically told his DP, he was like, there's not going to be any light in this film at all. None. If you see the sun, I want it blacked out. Which is funny story. That's why they film in Sweden, actually. It has nothing to do with the fact that the book is set there. There are a lot of great shots where he comes in over Elizabeth's head and then the camera inverts as she lights a cigarette, and that was fucking fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert, when Daniel Craig's character Blomkvist is he has the plastic bag put over his head, they actually have a shot that's like his POV and the camera's in the plastic bag. I was like, Fincher, you magnificent son of a bitch.
All right.
That was great.
Yeah.
And something that I think Fincher doesn't get enough credit for personally, he has this great sense, or he has a great feeling on what makes a scene tense and how to get the maximum amount of tension out of a scene.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where Martin comes home and Michael has been, rummaging around for things, and he catches him because Blomkvist slips and falls.
Right.
Where he invites him in, and there's that game of cat and mouse where like Mikhail knows, or at least is pretty confident that it's Martin, and Martin is putting together and piecing together like, oh, he knows, how much does he know? And then he's like kind of fucking with him like, oh, here's a flashlight. And then he's like talking about going hunting. He sees the gun. He notices the knife is missing. Just a phenomenal fucking scene.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And one final little thing from that I got a great piece of enjoyment out of, kind of perversely almost. In their original meeting where they're having dinner with it's Mikhail, Martin, and Martin's friend whose name escapes me. His I don't think she's not his girlfriend, but maybe.
Yeah, she's like a colleague of some sort that stops by whenever she's in town. I think they're basically like professional fuck buddies.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think there's it's pretty well hinted at that there's an affair of sorts going on, or that perhaps has gone on. But when they're having that dinner, you hear that it sounds just like a scream.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he says, "Oh, one of the windows must be open." That's something that is really apparent throughout the whole film, is the wind.
Right.
So when you first hear that, you think, "Oh, fuck, that was just a particularly nasty bit of wind." And then as they're in his basement later, he says, "There was a girl down here at that dinner," and I was like, "Oh my god, that really was a fucking scream."
Yeah.
That was great.
Right. Yeah. That was something else. All right.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I thought it was a very good movie. I have a lot of complicated feelings about David Fincher. I think that a lot of people overrate him for things that I don't really think that he deserves a lot of credit for, because he's not like he's not an auteur. He's very much a director. So he may have some changes to the story, but he doesn't write the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he gets a lot of credit for things like that he may not be as involved in. Whereas I think that a lot of other people are too dismissive of his skills as a director. It's kind of, for a certain segment of movie fans or film buffs, it's kind of in vogue to dismiss him as like the bro filmmaker,
Right.
which I think is kind of dumb. Like, if you've ever watched any of his movies, he's very clearly like, Fight Club. He's satirizing that pretty harshly,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't want to get on a soapbox there, but I think it's kind
No,
of
no, that no, I pretty much understand where you're coming from. Like, especially the one half of it. I guess maybe the overrating part. It kind of reminds me of how one could lend all the credit to Sam Mendes and either forget about or not know about Roger Deakins.
right.
Like you're like you're not going to have the same movie like Skyfall wouldn't be Skyfall if you didn't have Roger Deakins like as DP. So yeah, it's kind of I feel like that's kind of in the same ballpark as what you were trying to say. I mean, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, or misunderstanding, but that's kind of what it sounded like. So that definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah, but overall, like I said, I definitely liked it. I don't think it's his best film by any stretch, but it's still pretty goddamn good.
Yeah, very very long. I'm assuming that you blocked off a fair amount of time so you could watch this movie and like drink some water afterwards.
Right. Well, I mean, I like long movies, so it didn't.
Right.
I'm used to that. That didn't really bother me at all. I mean, it's definitely of a length where you need to. I don't want to say plan your day around it necessarily, but like for me, it's a movie that I would like to start earlier in the day rather than start at like 8 o'clock and then I'm like, fuck, it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm winding down
Right.
and I'm still watching this.
Yeah.
But still a good movie. Still
Hmm.
still recommended. Not for the faint of heart, definitely, but
No.
good movie.
This movie kind of came around before like trigger warnings were a thing. Like I remember, a few years ago, more than a few years ago, like trigger warnings becoming like a big thing where all of a sudden we were becoming more aware, more cognizant of things in TV and movies, on the internet, wherever, where almost like spoiler alert, but you throw out like a trigger warning for people that have suffered severe circumstances. That's where reading or viewing similar circumstances could be triggering. um yeah, this movie is a huge trigger warning just in of itself. So if you haven't watched this movie, um and not familiar with like some of the details, yeah, just know that it deals with sexual assault to a large extent, very large extent. So yeah, just know that going forward. um yeah. But Ted, I think do you we can do shit that doesn't suck if you want to um give any final thoughts to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or else we can move on to our shit that doesn't suck.
No, I mean, like I said, I liked it. I definitely think that if you do intend to watch it, just like I said, it's intense.
Mm-hmm. That it is. Um, do you have something lined up for your shit that doesn't suck? Or
Give me
do you
two
want?
seconds and get something if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I can go for it. All right, so for my shit that does not suck, I finally took the jump to watch Ozark. I had just one too many people recommend it to me, and I was like, fine, fuck it. Apparently there's something going on with the show that I just simply must see, so let's watch it. And let me tell you, I'm not disappointed. It's pretty good. If you're a fan of Breaking Bad and or Better Call Saul, you haven't seen this show, you'll probably like it. If you are a fan of both those shows and you have seen Ozark, then you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The tension is pretty similar. The color palette is quite different, but yeah, it's just a pretty good show, and it makes a lot of sense for Jason Bateman to play this character that's it's a very serious role, and he typically up until this point has mostly played in a lot of comedies, but even in the comedies he's still like the opposite of the comedic relief. Like he's kind of like this serious person out of all the funny friends, I guess. So to see him do like a 100% serious role with a little bit of humor, just a tiny bit sprinkled in every now and then, was interesting. It kind of took a minute to get my bearings, but yeah, like just an episode or two in, like I was fucking hooked. So yeah, if you haven't seen Ozark yet, I definitely suggest you add it to your list if you're into suspenseful dramas about money laundering. So yeah.
All right. Okay.
What?
Suspenseful dramas about money laundering. That's a little bit specific, I think. I don't how many could there possibly be, but
A lot. I don't.
sure.
Narcos, isn't that a thing?
I don't think that's about money laundering, but all right. For my shit that doesn't suck, I'm going to cheat. I've been on a huge comics binge here recently, reading and rereading a bunch of stuff that I have either, in the case of the former, wanted to read for a while and have never had a chance to, or in the case of the latter, rereading things that I have liked tremendously historically. So, what I'm going to choose is kind of open-ended, let's say, but I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, and I talked about the Punisher Max. My shit that doesn't suck is just the Max universe, so to speak. It was Marvel's adult imprint, I guess you might say, although usually adult has some pretty specific sexual connotations. I don't mean it like that. Just it's a more mature imprint, so to speak. So it's
Sure.
definitely it ups the violence ante, ups the language ante, ups things like that. So it's basically the R-rated version of comics, I guess you might say,
Okay, that's I
or
mean
Marvel comics.
that's good to know. I always saw that big old Max logo on some Marvel comics, and I was like, I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, it's basically like I said, the R-rated version of
Cool.
those characters.
Good to know.
There's a lot of good books. There's some that aren't as good, but that's with any sort of comics. Particularly, like I said, I particularly enjoy the Punisher Max, as well as Garth Ennis also wrote a couple of runs of Nick Fury, which is another great character. So if you can find any of them, because some of the Max books are a little older now, they're getting a little harder to find, but if you can track any of them down, I definitely recommend it. Or if you have, any of like the comics apps like Comixology, you can probably find some of them on there.
Dope. Yeah, I know we were talking the other day, and well, basically about this like every day since like this past weekend when you pick those books up and you're like, this shit's fucking dope, and I'm like, like I really missed out on the opportunity to go to McKay's with you because but yeah, that's I'm excited to get into some of those books. So whenever that happens. But yeah, I guess that's going to do it for this episode. If you have made it this far, congratulations, and I'm sorry. And I appreciate you listening nonetheless. Both Ted and I appreciate you listening and being a fan of the podcast. If you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, we would love for you to do so. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, pretty much everywhere that you can find podcasts. We are there. Look us up on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Like Ted said at the very beginning, in the intro, we have our Facebook group. So if you would like to join that, you can just get on Ye Old Facebook and search for Geek Garage group, and send us an invite link, and we'll hook you up. So yeah, I guess that'll do it. Like Ted always says, do the movies thing. Movies make life better. We none of us can ever remember how the fucking saying goes, so we just say do the movies thing. Isn't that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, we are the bannermen of professionalism around here. Let me tell you that.
It's a podcast about stories for children. I feel like we can get away with that.
You know what? I'm inclined to agree with you. And with that said, I appreciate all of you listening. Ted appreciates all of you listening. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Real quick, before we get into that, some pre-roll, as I have forgotten to introduce my co-host David. He's in the background somewhere.
Wait, who's this David that you speak of? I don't know who this guy is.
Honky.
Yeah.
For the events... Fuck.
For the events, fuck.
For the fuck events.
Right. I pissed my pants at church.
Or post-torture Jesus. The song is called Bathe in the Blood of the Lamb. Right.
3 days to Fucksville.